Alright, so today we're going to be talking about the Pilgrims and the founding of the Plymouth colony. Just quick review, we've been talking about the Spanish and the French. The Spanish down in Central America and Mexico, even up into Florida with St. Augustine over in these islands, and the French up in Canada, down Mississippi River, a little bit on the East Coast. We talked about that in the last chapter. And now with this chapter, 5-1, we talked about Roanoke and Jamestown. Roanoke, if you remember correctly, being the first unsuccessful British colony, and Jamestown being the first successful British colony. That was 5-1. But now moving on to 5-2, we're going to talk about Plymouth. And you've probably heard of Plymouth before, Plymouth Rock maybe, the Pilgrims, and the first Thanksgiving. That's all happening at Plymouth, the settlement that we're going to be talking about here today. So let's get right into it. The questions that you're going to have to be able to answer here today. First, why did the Pilgrims leave England? So we'll talk about why the Pilgrims, they were in England and they left England for the New World. And I'll give you reasons, I'll give you reasoning behind why they left England. You'll have to answer that for the first question to be able to answer. Next, why did the Pilgrims sign the Mayflower Compact? This Mayflower Compact is a document signed before the Pilgrims landed at Plymouth. So they're on the ship on the way over to Plymouth, and before they landed, they signed this Mayflower Compact. And you have to tell me why they did that, why they signed this document before getting off the ship. Next, who are the Wampanoags, and what did they do for the colonists at Plymouth? Wampanoags are a Native American tribe that the English that landed at Plymouth encountered, and you have to tell me what their significance is, and who they were, and why they were important to the colonists at Plymouth. Finally, the last question you have to answer is, how were the settlements of Jamestown and Plymouth similar, and how are they different as well? So in order to answer this question, you have to pay attention today to the questions to be able to answer today, as well as the readings here. So you have to get all these down, and then also look back to 5-1. So compare 5-1 and 5-2 and answer, how were the settlements of Jamestown and Plymouth similar, and how are they different? Remember, similar means like similarities means the same, opposite of different. So why, or how rather, how were the settlements of Jamestown and Plymouth different? Jamestown was 5-1. Plymouth is this one, 5-2. So you have to look at both of these and tell me how they were the same and also how they were different. So let's get right into it with this PowerPoint. So the Pilgrims found Plymouth Colony. First thing you need to know that it's that in 1534, King Henry VIII broke away from the Catholic Church and created the Church of England, also known as the Anglican Church. So the reason he did this, just quick history on why King Henry did this, was that he needed to have a son. He was the King of England. He wanted to have a son so that he could pass his being king down to his son, and his family line would keep going on. He was not able to have a son. He had a wife who was not able to have a son for him, and they were not able to have a son so they could hand it down. So he wanted to divorce his wife and get a new wife. But at this time, the Church of England didn't allow divorces for that reason. They wouldn't let him dump his wife and get a new wife so that he could have a son. So he decided, King Henry, being the king, decided that he could do what he wanted, and he would start his own church. The Catholic Church wouldn't let him divorce his wife to try to have a son with somebody else. So instead, he decided he would start his own church, and he started this Church of England, and that messed a lot of things up in Europe and sent Europe into something called the Reformation, and lots went on after King Henry did this. But you have to know, before we get into any of this Puritan or separatist stuff, that King Henry VIII broke away from the Catholic Church and created the Church of England. So a new church. He was the King of England. He just said, nope, we're not going to be part of the Catholic Church anymore. England's not going to be all about the Catholic Church. We're going to be about the Church of England. And King Henry basically did this so that he could do what he wanted with his marriage status. So both the Puritans and the Separatists have very strong feelings about the Anglican Church. So I'll talk here a little bit about the difference between the Puritans and Separatists and who they are. So they're religious groups that felt very strongly about this huge shift in religion in England, going from the Catholic Church to the Church of England. So, like I said, we're talking what are the differences between the Puritans and Separatists. So what the Puritans did is they stayed in the Anglican Church, and they tried to change it. So they were still devoted to their Catholic faith. When they were hardcore, strong Catholics, but when Henry VIII changed the religion to the Church of England, the Anglican Church, the Puritans stayed in the Anglican Church and tried to change it and tried to make it more like back towards the Catholic Church from within. So they stayed in the religion and tried to change it from within. But the Separatists, they left the church. When King Henry changed the religion from Catholic Church to Church of England, the Puritans stayed in and the Separatists left. They separated themselves. That's how they get that name. They separated themselves from the Church of England. So these Separatists are going to be really important to this story of founding Plymouth. So the reason that Separatists left was because they did not want to be part of the Church of England. So they actually sought religious tolerance in the Netherlands. So what seeking religious tolerance means is that they wanted to go someplace where they could practice the religion that they wanted. When they were in England, and England changed from the Catholic Church to the Church of England, the Separatists were told that they couldn't keep practicing the Catholic Church. They had to switch to the Church of England. But they didn't want to do that, so they left and went to the Netherlands to try to find a place where they could practice their own religion freely. So the Separatists, like I said, the Separatists are very important to this story of founding Plymouth because they ended up calling themselves the Pilgrims. And you've probably heard of the Pilgrims before. You've heard of the Pilgrims at Plymouth Rock, and you've heard of the Pilgrims in the first Thanksgiving. So these were who those people were. They were people in England that were Catholics who, when King Henry VIII switched the religion to the Church of England, didn't want to be a part of that, so they left. They left for the Netherlands, and they called themselves Pilgrims. They're separatists. They're separating themselves from the religion, and they call themselves Pilgrims. So that's this group of people that we're going to be talking about today. So the Separatists were actually granted permission to set up a colony in Virginia. So first, what they did was they left England. They went to the Netherlands, but they still didn't feel comfortable in the Netherlands. They were still in Europe. People in the Netherlands were not accepting of them. They needed to find a place where they could practice religion freely. And a big thing to keep in mind when we talk about this piece of history, the Pilgrims founding Plymouth, is what's called push and pull factors. So a push factor is something that pushes a group of people away from an area. So in this case, the Pilgrims were pushed away. They were pushed away by King Henry, creating the Church of England and getting rid of the Catholic Church. They were pushed away by that. They didn't want to be in Europe anymore because of this. They didn't want to be in Europe anymore because King Henry was changing the religion. They were pulled to the New World. They were pulled to a new land away from their homeland of England. They were pulled to a new land because of the possibility of religious tolerance in the Netherlands. So they were pushed away because King Henry changed the religion, and they were pulled because they could practice the religion they wanted to in a different place. So that's what push and pull factors means. But they were granted permission to set up a colony in Virginia, like I said. So they didn't want to be in the Netherlands anymore. They left England to go to the Netherlands. They didn't want to be in the Netherlands anymore, so they got permission to go to Virginia. And a man by the name of John Carver was the one that arranged the financial backing and found a seaworthy ship for the Pilgrims. So they were allowed to go across the Atlantic Ocean and start a new colony in the New World in Virginia. If you look down at this map, you can see they were trying, as it says down here, intended destination. They were trying to go down by the mouth of the Hudson River, down closer to Virginia, but they actually ended up going a little bit north and settling on Cape Cod here in what's now Massachusetts. So they missed their destination by a little bit to the north, but they were trying to go across to Virginia. So Pilgrim leaders decided to write the Mayflower Compact in order to establish some kind of law and discipline. So what happened was they were sailing over across the Atlantic Ocean, and they almost had gotten to the New World. They thought they were almost to Virginia, they thought. And so they said to themselves, before we get off this ship, we need to have some laws in place. We can't get off this ship and just let chaos ensue. We can't get off the ship and just try to wing it over here in the New World. We need to establish some kind of law and discipline before we get off this ship. So on their way over, they signed the Mayflower Compact. And you've probably heard of the Mayflower before because that's the ship. It was John Carver arranged this, the financial backing, the seaworthy ship. The seaworthy ship was the Mayflower. So they named this compact after the ship that they were sailing on. So they came over on the Mayflower, and before they got to the New World, they established some kind of law and discipline by signing this Mayflower Compact. And also John Carver was elected, it was decided on that John Carver would be the leader of the new colony. So John Carver was the leader of the new colony, and before they landed the Mayflower in the New World, they established some kind of law and order by signing this Mayflower Compact. So, like I was saying, down here where the Pilgrims settled, Plymouth, Massachusetts. They were trying to go down here to Virginia, down near to the Hudson River. New York, actually, it was Virginia. It's not present-day Virginia. It's present-day New York, but it was said that it was Virginia. It was named Virginia at this time. So they're trying to go down here, kind of closer to where Jamestown was, but they missed by a little bit. They missed to the north, and you can see it up here. It says future Boston. So Boston wasn't there, obviously, and New York City wasn't there. Obviously, these cities were founded later on, but that's kind of, this is where they were. They came in, and this is Cape Cod here in Massachusetts, and Plymouth is where they set up the settlement. So once they set up the settlement, the very first winter that they were there, it was a very harsh winter, and it brought lots of hardships and death to the Plymouth colony. So they had a really tough first winter. But luckily, the Wampanoags helped them during this first winter, and really were the key reason why they stayed alive. This would have been a lot more like Roanoke if it weren't for these Wampanoag Native Americans. They would have failed at Plymouth if not for the help of the Wampanoags. So it was the Native American group that kept them alive during that first really harsh winter. And more specifically within the Wampanoags, there was a Native American named Squanto. You maybe have heard of him, hearing the story of the first Thanksgiving. Squanto was a key figure, and Squanto was a Native American who was able to communicate with the Pilgrims. He could speak English, and had learned English, so he taught the Pilgrims how to hunt and plant corn and to fish. So this Native American Squanto was the individual figure that represents the Wampanoags, helping the English during that first winter. So, if not for them, we would not have had Plymouth being the settlement with the Pilgrims. It would not be as famous as it is today, if not for the help of the Wampanoags and Squanto more specifically. So, like I mentioned, in 1621, the first Thanksgiving was held. So this was a celebration of surviving that first winter, and it was a feast that was put on to celebrate the passing of winter, and it was a collaboration, the coming together of Native Americans and English in a friendly showing of friendship and unity, and thanks to the Wampanoags for helping the English survive that first winter. The Plymouth, the people who the Pilgrims that founded Plymouth Colony. That's what the first Thanksgiving was. So you've heard the story of the first Thanksgiving. That's what happened, was that the Wampanoags helped save the Americans, or not the English, helped save them, get them through the winter, and so in thanks they put on a feast, and that was known as the first Thanksgiving. So just a quick recap. Remember things to remember. You have to tell me why the Pilgrims left England. Think about the push-pull factors here. Like I'm mentioning, the things that made them want to leave, made them want to go somewhere else. There's some push-pull factors. Why did the Pilgrims sign the Mayflower Compact? Remember, Mayflower was named after the Mayflower, the ship they sailed over on. Why did they do this? Why did they sign this document? Who are the Wampanoags? What do they do for the colonists? So these three will be straight from the readings and the video here today. And then make sure you go and look back at 5-1 and answer how the settlements of Jamestown and Plymouth were similar and different. You have to look back at that. So have at it, get to work on those questions.